Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your entire life, the choices you've made, the fears that grip you, the people you love and push away, even the dreams you've abandoned, were not truly yours to begin with. Imagine discovering that the silent architect of your existence was not the present version of you, but the wounded child you once were. It sounds unsettling, doesn't it? To think that the 7-year-old you, with trembling hands and wide, uncertain eyes, still holds the strings of your adult life. That the arguments you have today echo the cries you once held back in a quiet bedroom. That your restless ambition may be nothing more than a desperate plea to prove your worth to a mother, a father, or a teacher whose eyes once turned away when you needed them most. What if the story of your life is less a story you were writing and more a script you were handed written in invisible ink on the fragile skin of your childhood? Pause for a moment. Think of the person you are today, the way you hesitate before speaking in certain rooms, the way you feel small in the presence of authority, the way you push yourself to exhaustion to avoid the sting of failure, the way you chase love only to run from it once it gets too close. Do these patterns feel random, or do they feel like shadows, following you even when you swear you've outgrown them? Here lies the paradox. We believe adulthood frees us, that age grants us control. But what if it doesn't? What if we are not as free as we think, but rather carefully programmed by wounds too deep to name, by silences too heavy to break? Psychologists call this the inner child. Philosophers might call it fate. Yet whatever you call it, the truth is the same. You are haunted by memories you do not consciously remember, bound by rules you never agreed to, and shaped by wounds you never chose. And here is the most disturbing thought. Those wounds do not merely belong to your past, they are your present. They are etched into the way your nervous system responds, the way your mind interprets the world, the way your heart either trusts or recoils. Childhood, it seems, never really ends. It only disguises itself in adult clothing. But let's dig deeper. If the child you once were is still inside you, whispering beneath every decision, then what does that mean for the very concept of identity? Are you truly you, the conscious, rational, independent adult, or are you a mosaic of unfinished business, of bruises never healed, of longings never met? Ask yourself, when you doubt your worth, whose voice do you hear? When you avoid conflict, whose anger are you afraid of? When you crave validation, whose approval are you still waiting for? Could it be that the life you live is not yours at all, but a carefully rehearsed dance around wounds you have spent your entire existence trying to forget? Here is the cruel irony. What we resist most about our past becomes the very thing that governs our present. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Could it be that what you call bad luck, wrong timing, or my personality is in fact your childhood wounds, silently guiding your steps? If so, then the question becomes not simply who am I, but something far more unsettling. Who is the child within me still forcing me to be? Think of the successful executive who cannot stop working, not because of ambition, but because deep down he still hears the echo of a father who only praised achievement and punished rest. Think of the woman who sabotages every relationship, not because she doesn't want love, but because she fears intimacy as much as the child who once feared rejection. Think of the artist who refuses to share his work, not because he lacks talent, but because somewhere, long ago, someone laughed at his dream. These are not random quirks of character, they are scars. And scars, whether we see them or not, shape the way we walk. So here is the great question that cuts deeper than we dare to ask. If your life is still ruled by the hands of a wounded child, What does it mean to truly grow up? What does it mean to be free? Perhaps freedom is not found in success, in love, in recognition, or in running from the past. Perhaps freedom begins in a confrontation, a reckoning with the child you left behind, the one who has never stopped calling your name. And this is where the silence grows loud, where the shadows begin to whisper, and where we must turn to face the hidden roots of our existence. For only when we see the problem for what it truly is, can we even begin to imagine breaking free. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots, second section. If the wounds of your childhood still write the script of your adult life, then we must ask, why does this happen? Why does the past, something we assume is behind us, have the audacity to shape the present? Why does the voice of a parent, a teacher, a bully, or a moment of abandonment still echo across decades, louder than all the wisdom we claim to have gathered? The answer lies buried in the architecture of the human psyche. From the moment you are born, you are not simply a blank slate. You are a fragile system of nerves, hungry for attachment, for meaning, for belonging. Every word spoken to you, every silence endured, every rejection suffered, writes itself into that system like code into a machine. A child is helpless. Unlike an adult, a child cannot escape a toxic home, cannot argue. Philosophy, with their abuser, cannot make sense of betrayal. The child only absorbs. The child only adapts. And that adaptation, though it may ensure survival in the short term, becomes the prison of adulthood. Carl Jung would call this the shadow, the collection of everything we could not face, everything we were forced to repress. Nietzsche might call it the chains of history, the burden of becoming what others expect rather than what we truly are. Sartre would remind us that in fleeing from our responsibility to define ourselves, we surrender to the definitions given to us by others. And Viktor Frankl, whose life was forged in the darkest crucibles of suffering, would say that the wound itself becomes the soil in which the search for meaning begins. But let us stay with psychology for a moment. Childhood wounds carve themselves into the nervous system. The child who grows up with unpredictable parents learns to stay hypervigilant, scanning every room for danger. That vigilance becomes anxiety. The child who learns that love is conditional learns to perform, to please, to sacrifice authenticity for approval. That performance becomes a personality. The child who is ignored learns to hide, to silence their voice. That silence becomes an adult who cannot ask for what they want, who calls their invisibility introversion while quietly drowning in loneliness. Do you see the cruelty? The very strategies that kept us safe as children betray us as adults. They are outdated armor we never took off, even when the war ended. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." He meant that we are trapped by unseen forces, drives, and impulses born from places we do not control. Childhood wounds are precisely such forces. They dictate what we fear, what we desire, even what we imagine possible for ourselves. You may think you are chasing success, but perhaps you are only chasing the approval you never received. You may think you avoid conflict out of principle, but perhaps you are only reliving the terror of a parent's rage. The hidden problem, then, is not simply that we are wounded. It is that we mistake the wound for who we are. We build entire identities around survival patterns. We say, "I am shy," instead of, "I learned to stay quiet so I wouldn't be hurt." We say, "I am ambitious," instead of, "I am terrified of being seen as worthless." We say, "I am independent," instead of, "I cannot bear the risk of being abandoned again." The tragedy is not that we are shaped by pain. The tragedy is that we confuse pain with personality. And society, rather than healing these wounds, often deepens them. The modern world rewards the performer, the pleaser, the workaholic, the perfectionist. It celebrates the mask, while ignoring the suffering underneath. Aldous Huxley once wrote that most human beings live in a state of quiet desperation, numbing themselves with distractions because facing the truth of their wounds would be unbearable. And so we scroll, we consume, we compete, never realizing that the emptiness we are trying to fill is not out there. It is in the abandoned child within us. Consider how culture shapes even the language we use. Man up, don't cry, be strong. These are not simply words. They are commands that silence the wounded child's voice. They demand repression, not healing. They turn vulnerability into shame, and shame into identity. And once shame takes root, it colors everything. Shame is perhaps the deepest scar of childhood wounds. Unlike guilt, which says I did something bad, shame says I am bad. It is not about actions, but about essence. And when a child internalizes shame, they carry it like an invisible weight. They grow into adults who may achieve, love, create, and succeed, but who underneath it all feel fraudulent, forever waiting to be exposed. Do you see now why childhood wounds hold such power? They are not just memories. They are the silent blueprints of identity. They tell us what love feels like, what safety feels like, what home feels like. And if those blueprints were written in pain, then pain becomes our compass, our map, our truth. But here is the unsettling twist. Even when those wounds are destructive, the psyche clings to them. Why? Because to the child, even pain is safer than chaos. Even rejection is safer than uncertainty. We cling to what hurt us because at least it is familiar. This is why so many people repeat cycles of toxic love, self-sabotage, or relentless striving. They are not irrational. They are faithful to the only map they were ever given. So the hidden problem is this. Childhood wounds do not simply exist in the past. They become the very fabric of how we perceive reality. They warp our choices, our relationships, our sense of worth. They create a world in which we live not as free beings, but as prisoners of old survival strategies. And yet, this realization, heavy as it is only the beginning. For if the past has this much power, what are the unseen consequences when those wounds remain unhealed? How? Much of our suffering, our loneliness, our quiet despair, is not the product of bad luck or circumstance, but of an inner child pulling strings we cannot see. This is where the silence of childhood wounds becomes deafening. For their influence is not only psychological, it seeps into every corner of our lives, shaping destinies we never truly chose. The unseen consequences, third section. Think of a puppet whose strings are pulled from above. The puppet moves, dances, stumbles, and falls, but the strings remain unseen. Now imagine that you are that puppet, and the strings are your childhood wounds. This is the invisible theater of adulthood. We believe we are acting freely, yet our every step is subtly choreographed by ghosts from the past. The unseen consequences of these wounds are everywhere, though most people never notice them. They live in your relationships, in your work, in your sense of self. They whisper in your fears and shout in your ambitions. They are so woven into the fabric of your being that you rarely question them. You simply assume, this is who I am. But is it? Consider love. The child who grew up abandoned does not simply forget that abandonment when they fall in love as an adult. No, the nervous system remembers. The body remembers. Every delay in a text message feels like rejection. Every distance feels like betrayal. the adult becomes clingy or controlling, not out of choice, but out of terror. The same terror the child felt when they cried in vain for someone who never came. Or take the opposite case. Another child, equally abandoned, learns to protect themselves by withdrawing. As an adult, they avoid intimacy, sabotage closeness, or keep partners at arm's length. They do not say, "I am afraid." Instead, they say, "I value independence," or "I'm just not the commitment type." What sounds like preference is in fact protection. What looks like freedom is in fact fear. Do you see the pattern? Childhood wounds script adult love stories, not just in dramatic heartbreaks, but in the subtle, everyday ways we give and withhold, trust and retreat, cling and let go. Now shift the lens to work. How many careers are secretly driven by childhood wounds? The perfectionist surgeon, the tireless lawyer, the overachieving entrepreneur. How many of them are not simply ambitious, but desperate to prove their worth to parents who never said, "You are enough"? How many sleepless nights, how many decades of grinding are fueled not by vision, but by invisible shame? Cognitive psychology reveals how deeply these wounds alter perception itself. Take confirmation bias, the tendency to see only what confirms our beliefs. If a child grows up believing they are unlovable, their adult brain will filter reality to confirm it. They will interpret neutral faces as disapproval, overlook genuine affection, and magnify every hint of rejection. To them, the world itself seems to echo the old wound, even when it does not, or consider self-fulfilling prophecy. The abandoned child expects abandonment. In expecting it, they behave anxiously, cling too tightly, or withdraw too suddenly, and in doing so, they create the very abandonment they fear. Thus the wound perpetuates itself, generation after generation, cycle after cycle, until someone dares to see it for what it is. Even on a societal level, the unseen consequences of childhood wounds are staggering. Entire cultures are built upon collective trauma wars, colonization, oppression, poverty. A nation raised in fear passes that fear down like an inheritance, shaping politics, religion, and identity. The philosopher Nietzsche once said, "The individual is the most recent product of history." We might take that further. The wounded child is the most recent product of family history. You carry not only your wounds, but the unhealed wounds of those who raised you. And here lies, perhaps, the most unsettling truth. The wound does not stay with the one who suffers it. It is transmitted. A parent who is never nurtured struggles to nurture. A parent who is never free struggles to grant freedom. Thus, the invisible scars of one generation become the inheritance of the next. The chain continues, silently, relentlessly, until someone dares to break it. But the consequences are not only external, they are internal, woven into the very sense of self. Neuroscience shows that repeated childhood experiences wire the brain. Pathways of fear, shame, or vigilance become default modes. So when, as an adult, you feel inexplicable anxiety, depression, or emptiness, it is not random. It is the nervous system replaying old music on repeat. And because the song is so familiar, you mistake it for silence. Isn't that terrifying? That what feels normal might actually be the residue of trauma. That what you call just the way I am may in fact be the echo of a wound you never chose. And yet, here is the cruelest part. Many people live entire lives without ever realizing this. They think their unhappiness is due to circumstance, wrong partner, wrong job, wrong city, when in truth, the source is far deeper, far more intimate. They rearrange the furniture of their lives while ignoring the crack in the foundation. Imagine this. A man spends his life chasing wealth. He believes money will free him from fear. But no matter how much he earns, fear remains. Why? Because what he truly fears is not poverty, is the helplessness he felt as a child when no one came to protect him. Another woman cycles through relationships, always disappointed, always heartbroken. She believes she simply hasn't found the one. But the truth is, she is unconsciously drawn to partners who replicate her father's absence, replaying the wound over and over. These are not rare stories. They are the silent biographies of millions. Perhaps they are your story too. So we arrive at the heart of the unseen consequence. We live lives that are not truly ours. We chase shadows, fight ghosts, and run in circles, mistaking survival patterns for destiny. The child within us keeps us safe. Yes, but in keeping us safe, it keeps us small. And yet, there is something quietly hopeful hidden in this darkness. For, if our lives can be shaped by wounds, then they can also be reshaped by awareness. If the child within us can imprison us, then perhaps it can also guide us to freedom, only we dare to listen. But freedom requires rebellion. It requires questioning everything we thought was just the way I am. It requires tearing away the mask and facing the trembling child behind it. The question now is simple but urgent. How do we break free? The rebellion, how to break free, 4th section, rebellion. The word itself stirs images of fire, upheaval, the tearing down of old regimes. And make no mistake, what is required to free yourself from childhood wounds is nothing less than a rebellion, not against governments or institutions, but against the tyrant within, the unhealed child who clings to survival patterns as though they were destiny. But here's the paradox. The rebellion is not loud. It is not the smashing of walls or the waving of flags. It is quiet, almost invisible to the outside world. For the greatest act of defiance is not conquering others, is facing yourself. How do you break free? You begin by committing an act so radical, so counterintuitive, that society often mocks it. You listen to the wounded child you have spent your life silencing. Think about it. The strategies you learned as a child, pleasing, hiding, performing, fighting, were all attempts to gain love or avoid pain. They worked then, they fail now. To break free, you must first see them for what they are. Outdated armor, the first step in rebellion is awareness. You cannot fight an enemy you cannot see. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious. He warned that what we reject in ourselves only grows stronger in the shadows. To rebel against your wounds, you must drag them out of the shadows and into the light. That means asking questions most adults avoid. Why do I panic when someone ignores me? Why do I overwork when no one is watching? Why do I push away the very things I claim to want? The answers are rarely flattering. But rebellion requires honesty, not comfort. Once awareness begins, the second act of rebellion emerges. Permission. Permission to feel what you were never allowed to feel. The child who was told, "Stop crying," must learn to weep. The child who was told, "Be strong," must allow weakness. The child who was told, "Stay quiet," must reclaim their voice. Do you see how radical this is? Society rewards masks, not authenticity. To peel them away is to break an unspoken contract. Yet without this rebellion, you remain enslaved. Nietzsche declared, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Chaos, in this sense, is the return of everything you suppressed. To break free, you must dare to feel the chaos again: rage, grief, fear, longing. Not to drown in it, but to finally honor it. For what is buried alive does not die. It rules you from the shadows. The third act of rebellion is perhaps the hardest. Reparenting, you must become for yourself what no one was for you. The nurturing voice, the safe embrace, the steady hand. Imagine telling the trembling child within you, "I see you, you are safe now, you are enough." These words sound simple, almost cliché, but to the child who never heard them, they are revolutionary. Viktor Frankl taught that even in suffering, meaning can be found. Your wounds, once faced, can become the soil of transformation. To reparent yourself is not to erase the past, but to rewrite its meaning. You stop seeing yourself as the abandoned child and instead become the adult who rescues that child. This is rebellion in its purest form, taking back power from the ghosts of yesterday. But rebellion is not only inner work, it requires action in the outer world as well. The person who has always hidden must dare to speak. The person who has always pleased must dare to say no. The person who has always chased must dare to stand still. Each act defies the old script. Each act proves that the strings of the puppet can be cut. And yet, rebellion is not a single moment. It is not one cathartic breakthrough that suddenly fixes everything. No, rebellion is a lifelong practice. Every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you rebel. Every time you choose truth over performance, you rebel. Every time you hold yourself with compassion instead of shame, you rebel. Some might ask, but what if it's too late? What if decades of wounds have hardened into identity? To that, consider this. The brain itself is plastic. Neuroscience confirms that patterns can be rewired, connections reformed. The story of your life is not set in stone, it is written in clay. Clay can be reshaped, even after years of neglect. And there is beauty in rebellion. For in facing your wounds, you discover something astonishing. The very child you once saw as weak is also the source of your deepest strength. The sensitivity that once left you vulnerable can become empathy. The loneliness that once crushed you can become independence. The silence that once muted you can become wisdom. The wound once healed becomes a gift. This is why true rebellion is not about destroying the wounded child. It is about embracing them, integrating them, allowing them to become an ally instead of an enemy. You do not kill the past, you redeem it. But make no mistake, this path is not easy. The world will tempt you to return to the mask. The old patterns will call like sirens, offering the comfort of familiarity. And in those moments, rebellion requires courage. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free. Freedom is not handed to you. It is wrestled from the grip of fear, again and again." So here is the truth. Breaking free is possible, but it will feel like dying before it feels like living. The old self, the puppet, the performer, the pleaser must crumble. Only then can something truer emerge. And when it does, you will see that rebellion was never about becoming someone else. It was about finally becoming who you were always meant to be. Yet one final question remains. If healing the wound requires rebellion, then what lies beyond rebellion? What is the ultimate truth waiting on the other side of all this struggle? Is there a revelation so profound that it changes not just how we see our past, but how we see reality itself? That is where we must now go to the final, most powerful realization. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. Below you stretches the abyss of everything you have feared. Abandonment, shame, rejection, loneliness. For years you have avoided looking down. You have danced around it, covered it with achievements, masked it with smiles. But now, after facing the hidden wounds, after recognizing their unseen consequences, after daring to rebel, finally look, and you realize something staggering. The abyss was never empty. It was not a void meant to swallow you. It was a mirror. Every wound you carried, every scar of abandonment, every echo of shame, every silence of rejection was not proof that you were broken. They were proof that you were alive. They were not chains around your identity, but invitations into it. The pain you spent your life running from was not your enemy. It was your teacher. Here lies the ultimate truth. You are not the wound. You are the witness of it. This may sound abstract, but let it sink deeper. For so long you have believed, I am unlovable, I am weak, I am broken. But who is the I that sees this? Who is the awareness behind the wound? The wound is an experience, not an identity. The moment you recognize this difference, you stand on the threshold of freedom. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of amor fati, the love of one's fate. To love not only the joys of life, but the tragedies, the humiliations, the wounds. To embrace them not as obstacles, but as essential threads in the tapestry of existence. This is not resignation, it is transcendence. It is the realization that the very things that scarred you are the same things that shaped your strength. Viktor Frankl, who endured suffering beyond comprehension, discovered that meaning is not found in avoiding pain, but in transforming it. The human spirit is not destroyed by suffering. It is destroyed by the belief that suffering is meaningless. When you see that your childhood wounds carried meaning, not because they were good, but because they became the soil of your awakening, you reclaim your life as a story, not a sentence. The truth, then, is both terrifying and liberating. Your wounds are not prisons, they are doors. But they can only be opened when you stop identifying with them. The child within you is not your master. They are your messenger. They cry out not to bind you, but to awaken you. What, then, does it mean to be free? Freedom is not the absence of wounds. It is the transformation of your relationship to them. It is when the abandoned child no longer dictates your desperation for love, but instead teaches you the depth of your capacity to cherish. It is when the silenced child no longer traps your voice, but instead reveals the sacred power of speaking truth. It is when the shamed child no longer whispers you are unworthy, but instead becomes the guardian of your compassion for others. True freedom does not mean erasing the past. It means carrying it differently. It means walking with your wounds, not as burdens, but as companions, for they have given you something no easy life ever could, the chance to awaken. Here is the paradox. The very thing you thought disqualified you from wholeness is the very thing that completes you. The crack in the vase is not its flaunted, is where the light enters. When you see this, everything changes. The people who once triggered your pain now become mirrors, reflecting the child still longing within you. The failures that once crushed you now become teachers, guiding you to your strength. The fears that once imprisoned you now become gateways to freedom. And then, something even greater emerges. You begin to realize that healing yourself is not only about you. For when you heal, you end the cycle. You no longer pass the wound to others. You no longer repeat the same silent inheritance. You become the rebel who breaks the chain for generations to come. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is truth. Studies in epigenetics reveal that trauma can be transmitted across generations, altering even the expression of genes. But so can healing. When you face your wounds, you are not just saving yourself, you are altering the destiny of those who come after you. And so, the ultimate truth is this: your wounds are not signs of weakness. They are the map of your becoming. They are the doorway through which you must walk to find the truest version of yourself. But there is one final realization, one that towers above all others. You have been searching your whole life for freedom, for love, for validation, for peace. You have searched in others, in achievements, in escapes. Yet, what if the thing you were searching for was never outside of you? What if it was always within the very part of you you rejected, the very child you abandoned? What if healing is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you always were before the wound? When you see this, the rebellion ends. The war ends. You no longer fight yourself. You no longer hide. You no longer chase. You simply are. And in that stillness, you discover the truth. You are not broken. You never were. The child within you was never trying to ruin your life. They were trying to lead you back home. So here you stand, at the edge of the cliff once more. But now, when you look down, you no longer see the abyss. You see wings. Wings you did not know you had. Wings you carried all along. And you realize, the fall was never a fall. It was always a flight.